Motorcycles are a big part of my life, and I've owned many different kinds and brands of bikes over the years. If it has two wheels and a motor, chances are I love it. However, my favorite are dual sport or adventure bikes. There is nothing that compares with exploring forgotten roads and trails on the back of a motorcycle, especially with my brother Tom, another lifelong rider. My name's Joe, and this is one of our adventures. Every year, Tom and I take an adventure ride that involves long days of riding nearly 2,000 miles of mostly dirt. This year we planned a route that would leave Redding, California, heading east into Nevada. From there we would ride north along the Applegate Trail through the Black Rock Desert and into Oregon. After heading west through southern Oregon and reaching the Pacific Ocean, we planned on following the coast south to Fortuna, then east again back to Redding. May 19th. After months of planning, mapping, testing equipment, prepping motorcycles, checking weather, and waiting impatiently, the day to begin the adventure had finally arrived. It had been an unusually warm and dry spring, and most of the snow was long gone from the surrounding mountains. Planning around the weather, and of course our work schedules, we decided by leaving mid-May we would hopefully avoid some of the extreme heat in Redding and Nevada. This year, we were being joined by our dad, Charlie. He had graciously volunteered to drive a sag wagon for us. Dad would haul our camping gear, spare parts, and supplies. He would be towing his small toy hauler that he could camp in, which would also allow him to transport broken bikes if things really went south. Tom and I would only have to carry our daily gear, emergency supplies, and tools. Dad had also done a lot of planning and came up with potential campsites. The plan would be for him to drive the highways to the campsites, make sure the site was suitable, and wait for us to arrive. If a campsite wasn't suitable, he would find an alternative on the fly and try contacting us or leave flagging indicating where the new site was. Much to our delight, at the last minute, Dad informed us he was also going to provide most of our dinners and a couple of breakfasts. Much better than the freeze-dried meals we're used to eating on our trips. We could really get used to this. Our first campsite would be in an area of the Lassen National Forest, a place we were all very familiar with. It was a beautiful morning to start the trip. Actually a little on the cool side for Redding. Cool but refreshing. This seemed promising. With a little patience and a lot of luck, we synced the communication in our helmets and we're on our way.
So, are we saying a few words? This is, I don't know what you'd call it. Maybe they would. This is a BDR. This is a homemade BDR trip. We're gonna ride 2,000 some odd miles, like 90% of it is off-road. That's the theory. Stay tuned.
That's the theory.
Tom was a little concerned about riding his Honda XR650 since we had just torn it apart the day before, rejetting the carb and adjusting a stuck exhaust valve. Nothing to worry about, I told him. We thoroughly tested it. We ran it for a good 15 minutes. I was riding my Husqvarna 701 Enduro. A big breakfast seemed like a good idea, so we stopped at one of our favorite breakfast spots, Joe's Giant Orange. No relation to me. A quick stop for gas. It would be 120 miles to our next fuel stop in Johnson Park, and we got on the short stretch of I-5 freeway that would take us to Gilman Road. I wouldn't realize it until much later. The microphone set up in my helmet, I had spent so much time perfecting, was not working. At least the video came out nice and mediocre. The ride along Gilman Road out to the bridge that crosses the McCloud River on Shasta Lake was a nice start to the adventure. The road is paved, but with almost no traffic. Just a beautiful winding road, dappled with shade from the oak and pine trees. We rolled along peacefully, really enjoying the morning air and the feel of freedom that comes from riding. After crossing the McCloud River Bridge, we stopped to remove some of our cold weather gear, since it was starting to warm up a bit. There was a day use area just past the bridge with a small deserted parking lot. After getting our gear straightened out, we started up our bikes. Well, I started up my Husky. Tom's XR had other ideas about starting.
Oh, that's not good. That sounds terrible. That's like broken bike. Do we have any cell signal here? Probably not.
The exhaust valve must have tightened up again and it wouldn't start. The good thing was, we were still fairly close to Redding. Tom could swap out his XR for his Kawasaki KLR 650. Of course, by this point, we were out of cell range.
I mean, we just need to do a bike change, unfortunately. But I got to get a hold of one of the boys to do that. Andrew ended up having to work today.
It was decided Tom would stay with his bike and I would ride back to where I could get cell signal and call my nephew Matt, asking him to load the KLR in Tom's van and drive it out for the swap. Well, this is certainly part of the adventure, I thought as I rode back along Gilman Road, glancing at my phone once in a while for cell service. Finally, at about 8 miles back, as I crested a hill near Hertz Bay, my phone lit up indicating service. Trying to wake up a teenage boy is only slightly easier than waking up a teenage girl, which I had lots of experience with my youngest daughter. I called Matt repeatedly until he finally woke up and answered the phone on the 4th try. A sleepy voice answered the phone. I said, "Matthew, this is your Uncle Joe. We need your help. Please load up your dad's KLR in the van and bring it out to us." From experience dealing with sleepy teenagers, I knew to keep him on the phone long enough, repeating instructions until I was sure Matthew was fully awake and comprehending the situation. After ending the call, I decided to head back to Tom and see how he was getting along with the XR. I was still hopeful he would be able to adjust the valve and fire up the bike. Meanwhile, back at the XR.
All right, I loosened up that exhaust valve yet again. Let's see if she's gonna fire up. If so, I'll try and make tracks backward. I'm just gonna have to swap it out for the KLR. Fun and excitement, and we're only barely into our trip. That's how it goes. Come on, baby. Oh, that sounds terrible. I still got nothing.
Unable to fix the issue with the exhaust valve by loosening it, Tom is stumped as to what the issue is. Time to stop worrying about it and relax. Although he wonders if I was successful in getting in touch with Matthew. Returning to the scene of the dead bike, I let Tom know Matthew will be bringing his KLR and we will be able to continue our adventure. We both agree. We sure are glad it happened while we were still so close to home. Time to pull out a chair and wait. Did you figure out what the problem is? I asked. Tom would find out 2 weeks later the issue was catastrophic. The sucked valve had broken the piston and scratched the cylinder wall. We decided it would be best if I went back into cell range to see how Matthew was getting along. While back in cell range, I give perhaps the most significant monologue of the century. Too bad no one will ever know what I said. Darn microphone anyway. Matt arrives and I follow him to the XR. If nothing else, it sure is a beautiful day. It was unfortunate Tom wasn't able to ride his XR, as it would have been a much better bike for riding some of the rough terrain and sandy conditions we were sure to hit. His alternate bike, the KLR, is a great adventure bike, but a little on the heavy side. At least the seat is a lot more comfortable. But did you bring the keys? Being the forward-thinking rescuer he was, Matt had brought both sets of keys, just to be on the safe side. Matt saves the day. We unload the KLR and load the poor broken XR into the van. Matt also had the foresight to make sure the KLR had a full tank of gas. We really owed Matt big time. A debt we would repay. Probably never. It was getting to be about 11 a.m. by the time Tom got his gear loaded onto the KLR. Still plenty of time to enjoy the day and make it to camp.
Well, we got the gear stuffed on the KLR, and we're hitting the road. Thanks again, Matt. Now, if the KLR doesn't start, I'm just gonna crawl in the hole and cry.
It sure was a relief to hear the KLR start up. After thanking Matt again and saying goodbye, we get back on the road. sure was ironic. The XR broke down just before the road turned to dirt.
Run, little squirrel. I've done it before. Oh, did you by chance hook your handlebar thing up?
I make a quick stop to adjust my Trail Tech map, leaving Tom a good opportunity to razz me.
That's the sound of Uncle Joe actually just erasing our whole GPS track. Hopefully I'm kidding about that.
A quick adjustment, and we're back to riding. It was nice to finally be riding some dirt, even though it was really easy riding. We still couldn't believe how perfect the weather was for riding. One of the great things about riding on dirt roads is how quickly the scenery can change. And being on a motorcycle, exposed to the elements, makes you feel more a part of the experience. You notice when the temperature changes a couple of degrees, the moisture in the air changes, the different smells, and the taste of dust. Sometimes it really makes you wonder, why was that bug in such a hurry to get inside my helmet? Just part of the experience.
Camera on just in case it is a bee and you get stung.
Fortunately for me, it wasn't a bee. This time. Fender's Ferry is a beautiful stretch of dirt that follows several different creeks as it winds along through the forest. Salt, Squaw, and Podum Creeks are just three of them before the road crosses the Pitt River. We enjoy a quick view of the Pitt River as we continue down the road.
Are you talking to the camera? That's usually where the lake stops, halfway up that dam. No, it's paved from here to the dam. Or maybe not even that far.
Sometimes it's hard to take in all the scenery while keeping your eye on the road, GPS, the whereabouts of your brother, and critters taking a nap. Watch out!
We almost ran over this guy in the middle of the road. Yeah, you almost run over him.
No rattlesnakes were harmed during the filming of this adventure.
Oh, well, that's not good. Well, that's okay. In theory, I got him on this camera, provided you can see something that small on this camera.
Eventually, Fender's Ferry Road tees into Highway 299. Fortunately, we only needed to stay on 299 for about 5 miles before turning off onto Big Bend Road. Big Bend Road is paved, so we turned onto a dirt road that would tie in with Hagen Flat Road right at Tunnel Reservoir. It was pretty low-key dirt riding with a nice tree canopy for shade. Tunnel Reservoir is a pretty little lake, and the road turns to dirt again just past it. Only a short distance down the road, we cross a small dam on the Pitt River. There are quite a few dams and powerhouses along this section of the Pitt. The road that follows the Pitt River, in that area, is mostly paved but small and makes for a nice leisurely ride.
Packing up after a Coke at Johnson Park. Somebody's pointing the camera at me.
After fueling up at a gas station in Johnson Park, we enjoy our traditional bottles of Coke and a quick snack. Obviously, my microphone still isn't working. I probably didn't have anything interesting to say anyway. Riding along Castle Fall River Road, we cross into the Lassen National Forest. Finally, back on some dirt on a Forest Service road. The terrain here is much more open and volcanic. The elevation is also much higher here, making for some chilly riding.
Most of the year, it's colder than a witch's tent.
Colder than a what? The red gravel road turns to a 2-track and keeps getting smaller, which makes for some near perfect riding. Our family has been coming up to this area for 5 generations. It would be extremely windy except for the tall pine trees creating a nice windbreak. Out in the open, the wind can really howl, but not as loud as the sandhill cranes that frequent the area. Time to launch the drone.
Uncle Joe said I'm going to stop and launch the drone. I see this, so obviously there's some new lingo in the city these days. Lost subject.
The time had come to test out the new drone and get some aerial footage of the ride. After a little bit of getting used to it, we were off. Along with our GoPro cameras, we were using a Skydio 2 drone, fully autonomous with high-end collision avoidance. It's able to track people and vehicles up to 35 miles an hour. Unfortunately, there are areas where the trees get fairly thick and the drone loses track of us and gets lost. But for the most part, it works really well.
We have a drone lost in the woods. We think we may take it home and keep it as a pet.
Making it to camp with plenty of light left, we greet Dad and set up the tent. It was nice having a big tent with cots and plenty of room to store our gear. After getting camp squared away, it was time to tackle Tom's tires. The KLR had street-oriented tires, which were not very good for sand and mud, which we were sure to be riding through. An old stump made for a perfect workstation. After getting the front tire changed, Tom needed to get the beads seated. We attempted the back tire, but the temperature had dropped so much we couldn't get the bead broken. It would have to wait until tomorrow. The nice hot dinner of meatloaf and mashed potatoes was a warm welcome after the long ride and cold work of changing a tire. We also checked the weather. It was interesting, and maybe a little concerning. It seems there was a slight chance of snow. By this time it was getting late. Well, late for us. It was probably all of 8 o'clock. We all decided it was time to turn in, anticipating tomorrow's ride.